So first of all, GPT-4 Omni and others are now multimodal. Let me give you an example of what that means. It's looking through the camera, interpreting the visual scene, conversing with the student or user, in this case as an accessibility aid outdoors.
Is the king in residence at the moment?
Yes, it looks like the king is in residence right now. The Royal Standard flag is flying above Buckingham Palace, which is a signal that the monarch is present. How exciting to be there while the king is home.
Try and tell me exactly what they're doing right now, please.
Right now the ducks are gently gliding across the water. They're moving in a fairly relaxed manner, not in a hurry.
Okay, so you get the idea. We've moved a long way from texting a chatbot to speaking with it naturalistically and having it respond in very realistic voice. And this is increasingly mobile. It's all becoming smaller, more efficient, located on devices. This will be in every student's pocket. Next up, let's just think about how students could use these tools to cheat. There's no question that this is a cheating tool. It's called Quizmate, and if you're affluent enough or decide to spend your hard-earned money on this, $7.50 a month US, it's going to do something like this for you when you plug it into your browser.
First up, we have a browser plugin called Quizmate. There are many of these available. This browser plugin injects itself into your Canvas quiz, for example, reads the quiz off the screen and answers the questions for the students. It can take in lots of different question types, as we can see here, interpreting the text on the screen. And when we submit the quiz, we can see that we can get full marks.
So quizzes, not so secure. You may be thinking that visual problems will be more resilient to AI, but it can now interpret visuals of many different sorts.
Asking students to apply prospect theory to analyze human risk behavior. I take a screenshot, paste it into ChatGPT, and it generates an insightful, well-articulated response that smoothly incorporates the course content. This is the kind of work we'd expect from our top students. Now,
Okay, so image processing is here now, and these foundation models underpinning chatbots like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, Anthropic have read and interpreted many visuals. Okay, let's move on. Let's look at something that's recently come out from Google. This is a way of generating a synthesized conversation about whatever material you point it to. So let's point it to the UTS response to Texa's request for information, which you will all have read, no doubt. This is a large document, and we can now generate a custom conversation about this material. Let's just have a quick listen.
Tailor-made for their university.
Okay, now I'm even more lost. What do you mean by custom chat GPTs? Like, what are they using them for?
So get this, they built these handbook bots to help them rewrite their entire course handbook.
The entire thing. Those things are like 1,000 pages long.
Right, and nobody actually enjoys reading them.
Oh.
From bachelor's degrees all the way up to doctorates. And it's across a huge range of fields too. Arts, tech, health, business, you name it.
AI this way. Not just in schools, but, you know, in our workplaces, in our everyday lives.
It's a powerful thought.
Okay, you get the idea. We've basically got a sort of upbeat audio talk radio chat between a male and a female host, and they are basically, providing an accessible introduction, very easy listening to this material. We could imagine this potentially being extremely useful for introducing students to some material. It may be that it's a particularly engaging way for students who are neurodiverse or have attention deficit disorder. So yeah, interesting, very interesting phenomenon. However, this is not going to really challenge students in the sense of making them think harder. It's not going to be tuned in a very pedagogical way. But Google have just made it possible to tune the conversation. And so in this next version, I can now add a prompt. So I explained that this is the strategic response from UTS to generative AI. I want the female presenter to argue persuasively for the need to change our assessment, while the male presenter needs to be both curious but a bit skeptical that this is really needed, and everyone's too busy to find the time, aren't they, to actually implement all these changes. So we can now shape the conversation in whatever way you consider to be pedagogically useful. So I've jumped to a point here where we get a little bit more skeptical about what UTS is proposing.
Like the Wild West.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're making it up as we go along.
Totally. But that's why it's so crucial to have institutions like UTS out there, blazing a trail.
For sure, for sure. But are they really blazing a trail, or are they just,
Lost in the woods.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But I do wonder about the practicalities. I mean, how do you even start to, I don't know.
Future-proof assessment. When AI can basically write an essay in like 5 minutes.
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And let's be honest, most academics I know are already stretched pretty thin.
Oh, tell me about it. Grading, research, admin, it never ends.
Right. So where are they going to find the time to redesign entire courses?
Where indeed. So you get the skeptical tone of voice. They're starting to follow the instructions. The AI got a bit mixed up. Turns out the female presenter is getting a bit skeptical as well, not just the male. Okay, so lots to explore here around the design of more pedagogically tuned conversations. All right, let's take another example here. This is where we're going to look at Algini, which, as you may know, is a UTS startup using algae technology. We're going to tune this conversation to help first-year UTS undergrad biology students to understand what this startup is doing. And the key here is that the female presenter is going to ask questions encouraging the students to relate what they're learning in their courses. I've just made up these courses for the sake of the example. And the male presenter is going to welcome the questions, but he's not actually very confident himself. And he's going to recommend that they discuss these ideas and questions in their next tutorial group. Okay, so let's just jump to a spot here then.
Okay, so we've talked about the why, we're on to the how. This helical photobioreactor.
Yeah.
It sounds so complex.
It's actually quite elegant in its simplicity, I think. Remember when we were talking about how algae need that perfect balance of light? It's kind of like we were saying, like having a plant on your windowsill, you've got to find that sweet spot, but this is obviously on a much, much bigger scale.
Like instead of a windowsill is this high-tech helix.
Exactly. And that helical shape is key. That's what allows for that optimal distribution of light, because the algae flow through this helix. It's like a thin layer, and those LEDs are strategically placed to make sure that every single algae is getting the perfect amount of light. No more, no less.
And I remember from Algae 101 that too much light can actually be bad for algae. Like algae sunburn.
Bringing back memories from Algae 101, we did talk about that, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure if that's an issue with Algini's system.
Right.
But I imagine they've probably factored that into their design.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another one for the tutorial discussion.
Okay, so the helix helps
Okay, let's take that into the tutorial. All right, so that's a little bit about where we're getting to. We've come quite a long way from the initial release of ChatGPT in November 22. Okay, you can follow those links up afterwards in the slides if you want to listen to the whole examples. Right, we are also producing secure, authenticated GenAI apps for students. We can't be sending them off to external sites at random places in the world, which make absolutely no guarantees about the confidentiality of your data. The first example that we have here is a Microsoft Copilot. This is Microsoft's chatbot. This is a version of ChatGPT 4, primarily integrated with their Bing search engine. And if you use the Microsoft Edge browser, you can also use it to generate images as well, using DALL-E, the image generation tool. So this is Copilot. When you sign in, you signed in as a UTS user. and the data is secure. And if you had a question here, well, what's the difference between ChatGPT and a proper pedagogical agent, right? People have actually been building these agents for a long time in the AI education research space. And there are products now which are much more tuned for learning than just ChatGPT, which of course was never developed by anybody who knew anything about teaching and learning. And I want the comparison in a table, please. Okay, so Copilot goes to work, hunts through what it knows, lists out some of the key attributes on the left and the key differences on the right. And of course, being integrated with the search engine, it's also bringing me back references to different academic sources here, as well as non-academic sources. I didn't actually ask it or specify what kinds of sources I wanted, so here's just a personal website. Okay, so pretty useful. That's just Copilot out of the box. Okay. The next thing we're doing though is just moving into pilot this semester as we move towards the end of 2024, our custom UTS chatbots. And these bots are running in the Microsoft Azure Secure Cloud for UTS. And we can now provide them with a level of tuning for UTS that we cannot do with Copilot or any other bot. For example, bots that are grounded in and respond only from a curated corpus of learning resources, or bots that have got very specific prompts that we want them to play a particular role in engaging the student, or, as we'll see in the next example, staff. Okay. Right, well, let's start with this accounting chatbot. This is in the OPM program, and this simply has ingested the entire Canvas content for this module. You can ask it any question about the module, but it will not know anything about anything else. So here's a question, I'm struggling with CVP. Can you explain this, please, for me? Yes, cost, volume, profit analysis is, etc., etc., etc. But you'll see these little numbers down here, 1 and 2, are the sources for its responses. And I say, oh, well, where did that come from? Right, citation 1 is this page from the Canvas module. We've got a preview here, which we can then go and check the original if we want to. This chatbot will also keep track of the different chats I've asked it, so I can come back and revise later on. This bot here is a second example. This is running in several subjects in pilot mode. This is called the Q Reframer bot. It helps you reframe your questions by suggesting implicit assumptions that lie behind your question. So let's jump to an example of this. So we're looking here at the Q Reframer bot for this TD subject in the TD school. Hello, I'm here to help you explore your questions more deeply. What's on your mind today? So let's try this question. How can we ensure that asylum seekers are contributing productively to their communities in Australia? Okay, well, I've got a few typos there, but in fact it's going to cope with that anyway. All right, so it's not going to answer the question. What it's going to do is say, well, it's commendable to be thinking about this, but let's consider some of the implicit assumptions that you seem to be making here, Simon, that asylum seekers may not be contributing productively to communities as a default, that there's a specific definition or set of criteria about what on earth do we mean contributing productively, and that the responsibility for this lies with either the asylum seekers themselves or external bodies. So which of these assumptions would you like to explore further? Well, let's explore number 1. And okay, let's drill down into this assumption. It may be beneficial to ask some more precise questions to investigate this. For For example, what are the common barriers that asylum seekers face when trying to contribute to their communities? How do existing policies and support systems impact their ability to do this? What examples are there of asylum seekers already making positive contributions? And I could type, 1B, let's drill further into that. So you get the idea, right? So this is very much a sort of Socratic dialogue style of chatbot, which is there to help me sharpen my own thinking as I drill down into these assumptions. Okay, so I'll just click through the slides, and this takes us to an example of a custom chatbot for staff. So some of you may be aware that in the CMM program, we were migrating the entire course handbook to a new platform, and we wanted to, as part of this, reduce the variable lists of course intended learning outcomes, silos, down to about 6, which are much more easily grasped by students and also easier to track for the course teams. And one of those had to be an Indigenous silo as well that met the UTS standard for Indigenous silos. And we were also looking to express the course and subject descriptions in more consistent student-friendly language. So we created SiloBot, which was one of a family of handbook bots. And the SiloBot would take the list of silos here on the left and convert that into a list of 6 on the right, which you can see here. And underneath, part of its custom prompt was to make sure that it showed its thinking. How did you map the originals to these new 6? And you can see it includes one which has to do with cultural competency with Indigenous populations. So this went through a fairly rigorous iterative design process and helped the education portfolio team to draft and redraft and then pass back to the faculties for review these revisions to the entry for their subject and course. And this delivered the project in an extraordinarily short amount of time. You can imagine the amount of time it would take a team of academics to just agree on how to distill their current silos into such a short list. Okay, so that just summarizes the current state of GenAI and also the kind of provision that we're beginning to make now to our UTS community.